Come out wherever you are.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Hey kids, welcome to Grumpy Nostalgia, the Second Look Cinema podcast, the show where we go back to the blockbuster new release wall of our memory, grab a copy off the shelf, pop it in the old VCR, and see what time has done to it. I'm Justin, that's Mike.
Howdy, counselor.
And we're here to help you navigate all those landmines littered down memory lane. Well, Mike, we're back again.
Yes, sir.
Before the holidays, me and Mike were putting these out pretty consistently, but, around Thanksgiving last year, we kind of got a little off our groove, started squeezing them in here and there, but we're kind of hitting our stride again finally.
It's always hard to find that good movie that fits in that groove too. You know, that one you just want to just look at again, and it's I don't know. There's times when you look through a list of movies from the early '90s, and you're like, do I really want to see that again? You know, and But after you mentioned Scorsese on our last podcast, this was very appropriate.
I had some second doubts about this one until I hit play, and then I'm like, okay, this was a good one.
Yes.
All right, so let's get into that. So for those that haven't ascertained yet, we're going to cover Cape Fear from 1991 this week, Mike.
Hooray!
Yeah. So let's just get right into it. Well, actually, before we do, I kind of want to give the audience a little update on the show itself. And Mike, I know you don't do a lot of research on the show either, so this will be news to you as well. But at the end of the year, you get a lot of the analytics from the hosting services that host our show, and a couple data points came in that I thought were kind of fun. We're not even in a year into the show, and we've got a relatively healthy audience for a podcast our size and age, if you will. But some Spotify metrics that I came across were particularly interesting. I think I want to shout out to everybody first before we go. According to Spotify, our podcast, Grumpy Nostalgia, TM, has created more content than 79% of the other podcasts in our niche, Mike.
Oh, my goodness.
Film and TV review, 1,137 minutes created. Again, that's a lot of content apparently for our little genre, so we're a little proud of that. And this is what I was particularly proud of, Mike. Again, these are Spotify analytics. I don't trust the Apple ones because they don't make any sense. So according to them, of our listeners, 82% identify our show as one of their top 10 favorites.
Wow.
61% of those listeners lump us into their top 5 favorite podcasts. And Mike, a whopping 43% of our listeners have us as their top favorite podcast.
Holy crap.
So once you get infected by our deliciousness, it's hard to go away.
Okay,
yeah, right.
Delicious. So, wow.
Yeah.
Delicious.
So as we're going, people ask us, how do you pick movies? We don't really have a process. It's just whatever comes to our head. And one of the people that asked that question the most is my betrothed, my lovely wife, Christine. She says, and she says, she was listening to the show by force, I mind you. And she goes, I don't get how you guys pick your movies. I said, well, we don't. We do what we enjoy. He says, well, I don't know. I don't like a lot of the movies you cover. I said, well, somebody does. And he says, well, a bunch of nerds apparently. And I said, well, hey, Christine, I'll have you know that 68% of our audience is female. To which she countered, well, they must be nerd females. So
you can't win there.
I can't win with this lady, but bless her heart. What's interesting, this happens to be one of her favorite movies, and so this is kind of helps build some bridges at least. So this one I'm going to dedicate to my wife, Christine.
Oh wow! Okay, I'll tell her not to listen to my side of my story.
All right, sounds good. All right, so Cape Fear, 1991. Now, this was released on November 15th, 1991. It was directed by Martin Scorsese. Mike, you might remember.
He sounds familiar.
Boxcar Bertha, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
I knew his mom. I knew his mom was a good actress, but I didn't know he was in any kind of directing or anything.
His mom is a hell of a painter, I'll tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
one dog goes one way, and one dog goes the other. But this was originally given to Steven Spielberg, and this is an interesting kind of swapperoo here. Spielberg asked Scorsese to take this one because he wanted to do Schindler's List, which originally was scheduled towards Scorsese. And he tried to convince him that, Scorsese to do a commercial picture so he could kind of subsidize and finance some of the other movies he wanted to do, which are a little more off stream. And those ended up being The Last Temptation of Christ and Casino. So it all kind of worked out there. So
cool.
Yeah, so it was written by Leslie Strick. You may know Mike from the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street. He did the Arachnophobia.
All right.
So
okay.
Comes from very humble beginnings. He wrote 24 drafts for this particular film, and it was adapted from the original screenwriter James Webb, who wrote a lot of early Hollywood film noirs, and it's adapted from the novel by James McDonald. And so it had a $35 million budget and was released into a relatively soft holiday movie season in 1991. So Hollywood played around with the cast a lot. There were a lot of people that were auditioning for this particular part. Producers had their own ideas. As we know, Martin Scorsese typically does a lot of his own casting. So, Mike, why don't you walk me through who ultimately ended up being in this movie?
Well, as soon as I say Scorsese, De Niro will be the next name comes from my mouth. So, of course, he's in the movie, and he's our titular bad guy, Avenger.
Very subtle. He went subtle for this one.
Yes, he went. He said, that taxi driver role you did for me a few years ago, I want you to up that like times 10. So
Can you go add some crazy to that?
Yeah, can you be Travis Bickle but crazier? Sure, Martin, anything for you. So I won't even talk about it. Nick Nolte. This is our first Nick Nolte movie. So
yeah,
I want to ask you, Justin, and this came up to me as I was watching this movie, and not Nick Nolte present day, but Nick Nolte of the early 90s, late 80s. Was he a hunk? Would you consider him a Hollywood hunk, or is he kind of is he more Gary Busey than Brad Pitt, if that makes any sense?
I think it really depends on the role, because I remember the time that he was considered a hunk, it was usually around, was it Prince of Tides?
Well, see, that's the thing.
I think that's the year he won the Sexiest Man Alive.
Yeah, because it's the Streisand effect. He was next to Barbra Streisand, so it made him look a little better, I guess.
Some would say the Yentl effect. I'd call it the Yenta effect.
Oh, Mandy Patinkin, why'd you do that? But yeah, I was thinking about like the movie like The Deep, or even like North Dallas 40. Back in the 70s, he seemed more like a tough kind of funky guy then, and and he kind of morphed his way into these roles where he's kind of a pseudo, like you think of Down and Out in Beverly Hills, which he seems to actually in real life become that character.
Yeah.
Or Tropic Thunder even, where he's kind of the crazy vet guy. Like he really kind of took his career from one, maybe from that hunky roles to the more.
Well, once you get the mugshot and the Hawaiian shirt, it's hard to come back from that.
Yeah, that's going to stay. I think that'll be with him the rest of his life. But he's been with he's acted in like comedies like 48 Hours, and like you say, he's been in Prince of Tides, a nice dramatic movie, and one of those movies I loved when I watched it, but there's no way I could watch it again just because of just how it turned my stomach to watch it, was Affliction. He was great in that movie, but I can't even think of like people pulling out their own teeth after watching that. Anyway, now and Julia Roberts hates him, so he's got that going for him.
Doing something right.
He plays the lawyer in the movie, and his wife is played by Jessica Lange, which I had to look it up. Okay, she was great as Patsy Cline, and I knew she had a great accent in there, and she had a good accent in this movie. But I was like, okay, well, she's got to be from near where we live, possibly. No, Minnesota, and that blew me away. I had no idea she was from Minnesota, because she pulls off a loads better accent than Robert De Niro in this movie. But yeah, she's I remembered her from King Kong and Tootsie, and like I said, Patsy Cline I think was her iconic role. But anyway, she's the second half of our couple, whose daughter is played by Juliette Lewis, who she had a little period of time there where she was like the quirky girl in California with a K, and Natural Born Killers, and in this movie, kind of peaked at a young age, I think. She's been in a few things since, but did a lot of art house kind of movies. I saw her recently in Christmas Vacation. I forgot she was one of the Griswolds.
Yeah, one of her first movies. Yeah.
Exactly. But she's better known to me, and I was glad I remember this while I was watching. I was like, Lewis, she's the daughter of Jeffrey Lewis, who is one of Clint Eastwood's kind of stable hands in a lot of his movies. You would recognize if you saw him. And if you knew the movie Salem's Lot, you would know him too. So there you go.
Oh, yeah.
Senator Fred D. Thompson is a lawyer in this movie. One of my favorite actors. Very limited roles. Yeah. Hunt for Red October, one of my favorite movies. And he was in Die Hard 2.
He plays a boss or a lawyer or a
every
politician.
Movie.
That's all he does.
Yep.
Yeah.
Law and Order also. He's a lawyer in that movie or show. So it's like, come on, man. He's good at what he does. He's good at one thing. Yep. And then Justin, one of your favorites, Joe Don Baker.
Wonderful.
Mitchell himself is in this movie. We lovingly know him for his golf club throwing techniques at TVs in Congo. And in this movie, he shows you a new skill. He shows you how to tie monofilament around a teddy bear. So I appreciate that most.
We'll get to that scene, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then you had 3 guys that appeared in this movie that were in the original Cape Fear movie that came out in 61. 62. It was Martin Balsam, who plays a judge briefly in this movie, and he was the cop in the original. And then you had Robert... Go ahead.
The ill-fated detective in Psycho, too, right?
Yes, that's correct. And one of the angry men from 12 Angry Men. And Robert Mitchum, who was the bad guy in the original Cape Fear, is now kind of the pseudo-good guy and plays the cop in this version. And then you had Gregory Peck, who this might be his last role. I couldn't be sure, but he plays, of course, the lawyer. So he was the one guy, but he's the lawyer for the bad guy in this movie. So at least he's got that going for him. But so those 3 guys making an appearance in this movie were really, nice touch. And special shout out to the cast member of the week, or I'm going to say credit of the week, was Robert De Niro's personal trainer, who, let's face it, De Niro was freaking ripped for this movie, and he actually appeared bigger than our Hunk, our Nick Nolte character in this movie. It surprised me the way they pulled that off. That was because in real life that De Niro has to be probably at least a head shorter and a bit smaller, but it worked on the film.
To your point, Mike, thank you for that.
Sure.
He modified it. He's infamous for method acting and taking on all the traits of the character. So all the tattoos are actually like vegetable dye that he has, so they would fade out. But he probably went through the process of getting tatted there. As you mentioned, his physical training, he spent quite a bit of time getting ready for this movie, getting down to like 3% body fat. And he actually had some dental surgery done to mess up his teeth. He paid like $5,000 to a dentist to try to like modify his teeth, and then at the end of filming, he paid another $20 to get him set back right. So or just act. I don't know, one of those two.
Yeah, dude, one or the other.
Just a couple other notes on that cast. Harrison Ford was everybody's particular, especially Robert De Niro. He pleaded with Harrison Ford to take the role that Nick Nolte ultimately took. Harrison Ford couldn't be swayed. Back when Spielberg was attached to the project, he politicked Bill Murray to play the Robert De Niro role.
Really?
Which would really, if that had come to fruition, that might change the pop culture forever.
It'd been like an evil "What About Bob" kind of movie.
Diane Keaton was auditioned for the Jessica Lange role, the Juliette Lewis role. Quite a few young actresses auditioned for that. Sarah Jessica Parker, Drew Barrymore, Winona Ryder, and Reese Witherspoon. But she ended up getting the role. So, but I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is the score done by composer Bernard Herrmann, who's done a few good movies in his composing career, Mike. Citizen Kane, Psycho, Taxi Driver, Vertigo. Perry Mason. So you may have heard some of his before. The score was really just a takeaway from that. Just amazing score. Melodramatic, pompous, over the top, but really kind of sold the movie.
Oh, yeah. And it was almost note for note the original, because I guess he did the original score for the one in the 60s.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was.
Yeah.
You watched that movie and it was the same score in most of the scenes and like that same ominous dun dun dun.
Yeah. When you hear that,
hear
that music, you know what movie you're seeing. You can't really say that with a lot of scores, so that's really impressive. So, but this came out in 1991 against Beauty and the Beast, which had come out a couple days earlier. The Disney classic that was the first animated film to get a Academy Award nomination, and the weekend after, the Addams Family. Fievel Goes West and the sappy For the Boys came out, so that was the competition for this movie.
Midler.
It's a lot, quite the spectrum of stuff in the theaters at that point. Back in 1991, I think around the time this movie came out, there's a couple instances of pop culture that we need to take note of, Mike. Primarily, the 100th episode of Full House had debuted 5 days earlier. They made 100 of those things by 1991. The hot Christmas item around November when this was out, the hot Christmas item was the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. That was the hot toy. It was the year that Kentucky Fried Chicken changed its name formally to KFC.
No more fraud, please.
Things we were reading in the bookstore were Stephen King's Needful Things and Bret Easton Ellis's American Psycho. Those were top sellers.
Yeah, I read that one.
And Richard Gere married Cindy Crawford.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And Mike, I pulled this one out for you because I know you're a big fan. The number one song on the charts was the Michael Bolton classic, When a Man Loves a Woman.
You know what? There's nothing like taking a really good soul song and having some muffiny-haired white guy sing it years later and just ruin it.
Where was grunge, Mike?
Oh, yeah. Coming up soon.
It was the incubator, just waiting to get there. So, all right, but that's kind of the landscape where we were at that point, Mike. So I'm ready to start if you are.
Let's fire it up.
All right, so we're gonna look at what was considered at the time a kind of a sellout for Martin Scorsese. It didn't seem like it seemed a little too commercial for him, but I think as time has passed, it's kind of found its own little niche in history. So without further ado, Mike, hit the button. So the movie starts with water, the source of all life. Right away, you get the Bernard Herrmann score, just really super loud, and you get some ominous reflections, and there's a lot of rain, and you get the overexposure, which is a relevant theme in this movie that was just kind of creepy, had its weird effect. But it starts with young Juliette Lewis's narration. She kind of sets the stage for you. And we kind of cut into the jail cell where Max Cady, played by Robert De Niro, is doing his workout.
Okay, I paused it. I admit, this was the first moment of the movie. I was like, okay, I got to see what the hell pictures this guy has. And it's the oddest collection of pinups he has. He has Stalin, George Patton, Robert E. Lee. Which, okay, say well. Okay,
you know what I like best about Patton? He was a magnificent son of a bitch.
And then you got Friedrich Nietzsche in uniform, and then Alexander the Great. So very odd collection. All of
models,
law books he has. So you're immediately led to believe, okay, well this guy's been reading up. He's quite a scholar.
He kind of extracts little bits of their personality into post-prison Max Cady. He's got a little bit of all of those, especially the Nietzsche stuff, which was really creepy. So it's his last day in prison, and he walks out of prison, and he walks right into our faces, Mike, which is pretty cool.
Yes.
The composition of that scene was really cool, him coming through the prison gates, and in the background there's thunder and there's lightning and all that kind of stuff. That was a really cool scene. Yeah, and right away you know that this isn't a traditional Martin Scorsese movie. He's gone a certain route here already. And we get introduced to the Bowen family. It's played by so we got Nick Nolte, Jessica Lange, and Juliette Lewis, and they're not the perfect family, Mike. You can tell right away that they're kind of damaged. There's some issues behind there. They kind of open up and they're all at the movies, enjoying Problem Child, Mike.
Yes.
The nerve of that.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that part. I was like, oh my God, why?
Yeah. So there's this iconic scene where Max Cady puts himself into the theater, lights up a giant Cohiba cigar, and starts laughing. He thinks Problem Child is really funny, Mike.
He laughed more at that scene than I have at all of John Ritter's movies combined. I mean, that was incredible.
Yeah. Our advice to our audience: laugh like Robert De Niro laughs.
Yes, please do. Light up a stogie and laugh.
Yeah, forget about dance like no one's watching. Laugh like Robert De Niro. So they get annoyed and they just kind of leave the theater. And as they're out getting ice cream, De Niro starts, kind of following them, and you can see that something's amiss here. So the next day, after he has a racquetball session with one of his clerks, played by Ileana Douglas, who suggested that there's potential flirtation there, maybe some extra marital affairs potentially there. As he's in the parking lot, Max Cady introduces himself to Nick Nolte, and the wardrobe here for Max Cady, Mike, amazing. I think there was a polyester shortage in Hollywood after this movie came. But he lights up his cigar with one of the greatest lighters I've ever seen, Mike. The little naked lady lighter.
The booby lady, yes.
With awesome. The boobies lighting up, that was funny. But he introduces himself, and we get it. There's a little exposition here where he introduces himself, and they end up knowing that this was Max Cady was was represented by Nick Nolte, I think 14 years prior, on a rape or battery charge, and it didn't go well. And he ended up going to prison. But there's more to the story, and we'll get there. But he starts showing up in the Bowen's life like Michael Myers. You see him around the corner. He's just stalking them essentially. So at this point, Nolte gets a little. He knows more than he lets on. He certainly doesn't let his family know, but he knows that there's a backstory to Max Cady, and there's some deception there, and there's some lies, and maybe some guilt attached to that. Something went bad in the past here. So he talks to some of his lawyer friends. And here, where it's is it Senator Thompson, right? He's talking to Senator Fred.
Yeah, that's his lawyer. I guess that's his colleague in his office.
Yeah. And here he confesses that he intentionally kind of buried some information that might have helped Max Cady beat the case, but given the brutality and the savageness of the crime, Nick Nolte chose to bury it just to not let Max Cady get free, and that ultimately ends up being the problem here, Mike. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Evidence was hidden from the court that could have been presented, and Nick Nolte buried it, and that could have led to a lesser sentence for our friend, the Mr. Cady.
Yeah. So Mr. Cady, like all good white trash, when he goes to prison, he starts leading up on lawyer books, and he starts representing himself for appeal, and then he starts to find out that all this stuff was omitted during his original trial, and that and prison rape and some, although that didn't sit well, and it's kind of morphed into this monster that's really hell bent on revenge, and that kind of sets up the plot of the movie. So there's some more harassing. R.I.P. to Ben the dog, the family dog.
Of course, you knew that. You knew that dog was going to die as soon as they mentioned.
I hate it. Anytime there's a dog in a drama, that dog is going to die.
Yes.
Because that's a lazy device for screenwriters. Because we'll get onto that another day. So
and that goes double for Latina maids also.
Hey, slow down. We're getting there. The Bowen family is at a parade, for example, and Max Cady's on the other side of the street stalking them. And I bring up the parade scene, Mike, because
I'm following. I know exactly what you're going to say.
Okay,
go ahead.
So there, during the one of the entries in the parade is a tap dance group. I'm telling you the story because, as I mentioned, this is dedicated to my wife, and one of our favorite things to mention or tease each other about was the line. I think Nick Nolte says, "Why didn't you get into tap?" And Juliette Lewis says, "I wanted to once, but I don't know." And we have used that line to hurt each other. It's kind of like a cringeworthy line, a douche chill line that me and my wife have shared for 30 years. But I noticed on my second view here that the lip sync, the audio during the scene, her lips aren't moving as she utters this infamous line.
Wow. Okay. See, I was distracted by the San Remo and Hollywood gift shops that was behind the crowd.
Yeah.
I was like, I know it's supposed to be in a fictional town of New Essex, which could be anywhere, But still, it was a little distracting to see something that was advertising Hollywood Gifts in what's supposed to be an East Coast location. So that's what it was hard to process anything else for me other than that visual faux pas.
Well, I think I might have Scooby-Dooed this because they shot this in South Florida, so that could have been Hollywood, Florida. So.
Okay. It could have been. I never even thought of that.
Well, there you go. What?
So good thing they drive. It's a good thing they drive to their houseboat in Wilmington. Then.
Yeah.
They're so close. Well, we'll get to that.
We'll get to that too.
Have some geography issues.
Yeah, I know. All right, so as we learn here that Max Cady, he may be this goon, but he's pretty clever, and he knows what the law will allow and what it won't, and he starts to really kind of own Nick Nolte. So he knows he can harass him to a point, and then Nick Nolte kind of loses his cool. The parade goes over there and punches him, and then all of a sudden, Nick Nolte looks like the weirdo, like the creep, right?
Oh yeah.
So, so the next scene that they kind of pick up where Max Cady kind of is in a bar, and he starts hitting on a vulnerable, very tipsy Ileana Douglas, who we mentioned that was the friend of Nick Nolte, and he goes, he takes her back to her room, and he goes full Hannibal Lecter on her, and just kind of beats the hell out of her, which is really, really disturbing scene, Mike. Not cool.
Not cool at all.
And you start to see the brutality of him and what he's capable of, and this is where the movie gets a little more suffocating, a little more creepy. But he's very clever because he picks her because she works in that line of law. She knows that it's very difficult for people to come forward. The situation that typically the victim is on the lesser side of that argument, so she doesn't come forward, and it puts some strain on that marriage with Nick Nolte and Jessica Lange, because it's implied that they've had some marital problems in the past. In fact, they had to move because of his infidelity, which is we'll talk about the original movie too. The original movie, Gregory Peck was this noble man trying to protect his family, but where Scorsese takes it, he takes a very flawed man and just adds layers of conflict there. And
well, with Jessica Lange too, there's like this unwritten thing that's going on with her. Something's like the putting on the pink lipstick, and like it's just kind of it's almost like there were some scenes on the cutting room floor possibly with her and her background too. Like something's going on in her head that's a little
it's almost like Jessica Lange had this whole other movie in her head. I mean, she's a very interesting character. Like there's a lot there she's great, but there's just like a lot that doesn't get fleshed out of her character.
No.
But anyway, so Max Cady puts this woman in the hospital, and it pushes the narrative that to Jessica Lange that Nick Nolte may have had an affair with her, tying those things together. So it really kind of ramps up the problem. So they talk to the detective, played by Robert Mitchum, for help, and Robert Mitchum, as Mike mentioned, played Max Cady in the original Cape Fear, but he plays the other side of the fence here, and he suggests maybe you need another option. So this is where we get to the Joe Don Baker part.
Yes.
So Nick Nolte hires the private detective, played by my favorite actor of all time, Joe Don Baker. Getting this private detective even puts more pressure back at the Bowen house. Brushes up all his old infidelity as well. Joe Don suggests, because of Max Cady's tactical solutions and things like that, he really doesn't have a legal leg to stand on. So, of course, Joe Don suggests that they do a hospital job on the guy, which is essentially, I think he said lead pipe and a bicycle chain.
That's right.
Negotiations, and Nick Nolte says, "No way, I'm a lawyer. That'll get back to me, whatever."
By the way, the Joe Don Baker cocktail doesn't sell very well, but it comes with a Jim Beam and a Pepto-Bismol chaser.
Oh, so was that not revolting? Yeah. Joe Don Baker. So in the middle of the movie, there's a agonizingly long, almost 11-minute scene, Mike, where Robert De Niro, Robert De Niro kind of propositions Juliette Lewis as her as a new drama teacher, and kind of goes under that guise and tells her to come downstairs into the basement. And it's just a really awkward scene, which I understand most of it was improvised between those two actors. which doesn't help anything, I guess.
It was, again, I can see why, Juliette Lewis was picked for this role. She's very
she's
perfect for it, and her acting skills in this movie are great. But the whole, like you say, I didn't realize it was that short. It felt more like an hour to me. And then
So this scene was harder for me to watch than a lot of the violence, because the psychology and the manipulation of it is just really awkward and painful. And about halfway through it, she ascertains that he's not really the drama teacher; it's actually Max Cady, and she kind of develops this like weird, bizarre admiration for him. Rebellion, what you want to call it, rebellion against their parents, or things you can do to teenage girls that are vulnerable like that. But this scene was awful. So word gets back that this happened, and that pushes Nick Nolte over the edge. And suddenly that hospital job's not such a bad idea, so they arrange that to happen. So the hospital job's back on, Mike. And I'll tell you one thing: the New Essex thugs are a bunch of trash.
Correct.
They're awful.
They're bad.
So those three guys beat the crap out of Max Cady, but Max Cady ultimately kind of overpowers them and beats the hell out of them. And now he's in serious trouble. But prior to this, Nolte made one last attempt before the hospital job. He said he goes into the restaurant and says, you need to leave or you're going to get in some serious pain. And of course, a lawyer, he didn't think twice that he could possibly be recorded. So the next day, it turns out that not only has Max Cady recorded this threat from Nick Nolte, he's also used the lawyer that Nolte was hoping to hire. He's already retained his services already, and he actually gets a restraining order against Nick Nolte. So he's out lawyering Nick Nolte. So again, the stranglehold gets even tighter, and now Nick Nolte doesn't even know what to do. And then our friend Joe Don Baker decides that he's got a better. He devised this great plan, Mike. So as a result of going in and getting the restraining order, he was facing a disbarment hearing, and one of the things he had to do was fly up to Virginia for the hearing.
Was it Atlanta or Virginia?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
But he's leaving New Essex, leaving his family alone. And Joe Don Baker says, well, what better opportunity if he knows you're out of the house? He may come for your family, and then you can be there. And if he comes into your house, you can shoot him, and all things are nice and legal. So they go this elaborate ruse where they go to the airport, and he hides in the back seat, comes back home, and so the Bowen family kind of sets up their house as a fortress on the assumption that Katie's going to come back. And it's where Joe Don Baker gets to spend the night, and he with his little 38 snub nose and his Pepto-Bismol cocktail. But he runs so he runs monofilament line around all the doors and shutters in the house, and then he ties it to his little bear. And then the thought was, if anybody tries to enter the house, the bear will move, and then Joe Don Baker will shoot them. Or, a security camera or whatever. But 1991, Mike.
That's right.
So it ends up, the plan doesn't go very well, Mike. Robert De Niro ends up coming in and killing the Spanish housekeeper.
No.
And then does the Heath Ledger, puts on the maid's wig and the uniform, and ends up strangling poor Joe Don Baker with the piano wire, which was a pretty gruesome scene.
Yeah.
In the struggle, a shot is fired, and the family runs down, and they see that Joe Don's been murdered, and they see that the housekeeper has been murdered, and that's their trigger. They hightail it out to Cape Fear at this point for their houseboat. So they flee the scene, Mike. They become fugitives because they're really out of options,
Yes, that's right. So their houseboat so they live in Florida, but they keep a houseboat in North Carolina.
Mike's gonna do the math now. Hang on, everybody.
That's not even math. It's like, dude, you're surrounded by water. You're on a peninsula, but you're gonna keep a houseboat off Cape Fear River. It's just well. I'm sorry. I'm skipping over the fact that we have Indiana Jones De Niro under the car.
Oh, so they bolt for Cape Fear, but guess what, Mike? De Niro is De Niro straps himself to the undercarriage of the effing car, man, which was a cool scene. He dragged himself all the way to Cape Fear, which is a mere 3 hours from where me and Mike are currently recording. So, right? Cape Fear is not too far.
Yeah, 3.5 in a good day.
Yeah,
not too
bad.
Go
check that out.
Yeah. But it was they were I congratulate them on this because they I don't know if it was Scorsese's idea or De Niro, but they were able to capture two of the most notable parts of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where you say, well, how did Indy survive on top of a submarine getting to the Nazi Greek island? And you combine that with how did he survive going underneath a truck? Ta-da!
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 Yes. Oh, boy. But, hey, it's a movie. So they get on their houseboat and they're having dinner the first night, and of course there's a big squall, big rainstorm that comes in, and De Niro kind of comes on the boat, and it really shows you how inept Nick Nolte is. He goes out to check the anchor and gets captured immediately, then hogtied, and then the last 15 minutes of the movie are just this really horribly intense situation where De Niro's finally exacting his revenge, which involves taking advantage of his wife and daughter, making him view the whole thing, and luckily Juliette Lewis has got enough on the ball to she sets him on fire at some point when he's not looking, as he's lighting his cigar, which is really a horrible. Even the special effects in there were good enough to look real.
Yeah, I was going to ask you who was the better. This is not promise Scout's honor. This came to me as soon as I saw the scene. I thought, who was the better stunt double? A bewigged Sean Connery double or the burning De Niro?
Yeah. So he ends up getting the RoboCop haircut, where it's all the front of his hair is all burned off. But it's a series of tests of will and fighting, and what ultimately comes into play here is that the river kind of overtakes the houseboat and knocks De Niro loose.
By the way, dear listeners, if you go up the Cape River, even a pretty good ways up from Wilmington, there are not boulders in the middle of the water. Just so you know.
Yeah, but as the tempest swirls, there's lots of fighting and killing. And then Jessica and Juliet kind of jump off the boat, leaving Nick Nolte to finally try to be a man and actually fight this guy. But he manages to slap some handcuffs on Max Cady's ankle and ties him and locks him to the mast. And as the ship gets kind of crushed,
that was a terrible CGI effect.
Yeah,
oh my god!
Yeah.
Amazed at how just cheap it looked for the time.
So De Niro's kind of as he starts to go under. Well, first of all, Nick caves his head in with a boulder. that's conveniently located on the bank. And I don't know about you, Mike, but just given it's like a tension release when they're fighting, and when he finally brings that rock down on his head, you're actually rooting for someone to get their head crushed. But it kind of knocks De Niro a little bit wonky, and the tide kind of takes him out, and he's like,
oh, they dibbity doo, bud, goobity doo.
So what Mike's alluding to there is he starts gibbering. He starts speaking in tongues, and ultimately the water takes him under and kills him. And then Nick Nolte is left on the shore, and he's reunited with his family, and what's left of their family anyway. And the Juliette Lewis's narration kind of picks up at the end and kind of takes us out, kind of closes the story and how they kind of put it out of their memory. And then it goes really quiet, and then that Edward Herrmann score kicks in really super loud again, and you get that weird overexposure in his eyes, and the movie's over.
Dude, did you? And if you listen all the way through, the music fades out, and it's just the sound of rain, and then at the very, very, very end, after everything's blacked out, there's a scream.
There's crickets, and then there's this woman screaming at the end.
Yeah, I was like, what the hell does that mean? I was like, there's a little head scratching there. I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
By the way, hashtag, I'm going to make this go viral, hashtag Muddy Jessica Lange.
Yes, how cool was she?
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that me and Mike have noticed that as a result of watching these movies again, we watch all the way to the end. We watch all the credits, and a lot more often than not, Mike, there's always some interesting take on the final credits that no one seems to. Most people don't have the patience or tolerance to sit through the entire credits, but uh, I think it's a little different now with the end scenes stuff that Marvel puts in. But if you actually sit through the credits, there's neat little Easter eggs in there that nobody catches the first time. But
Right.
it's one of the interesting things about going back and watching these movies as a result of this show that I really enjoyed. One of the discoveries we found is the end credit scene. So
Yeah.
but this one really kind of holds you by the throat for about 2 hours and 7 minutes, and at the end you're kind of spent. But yeah, we'll get to our take here on the movie here in a second. But as far as awards and accolades go, this had a $10.3 million opening, which is pretty healthy back then. Ended up doing $79 million domestically and $182 million worldwide. So
Wow.
to that date, it was De Niro's most successful movies. Robert De Niro and Juliette Lewis received Oscar nominations for their role, but did not win. The Geniuses at MTV, Mike, the MTV Movie Awards.
Goody.
We're back to them again. It's been a while. We missed them. Robert De Niro was nominated for Best Male.
Okay.
And
best accent.
And best, yes, and Best Villain, Mike. Best Male and Best Villain. And the one that really creeps me out beyond no measure is Robert De Niro and Juliette Lewis were nominated for Best Kiss.
Oh no. Ugh.
Yeah, a sexual predator kissing an underage girl was nominated for Best Kiss by MTV. Nice job, guys. Keep up the good work.
Way, right? Right?
Yeah, keep up the good work. So, as Mike mentioned earlier, this is a remake of the, I think, 1963 version of Cape Fear.
61, 62.
61, yeah.
It was filmed in 61, but I think it might have been released in 62. Yeah. But yeah.
So Mike and I both watched the original. For context, Mike watched it a little bit later, but we encourage everybody to watch this movie, that original movie as well. It's great not only as a frame of reference, but just it's great on its own, just standalone, just a great movie. One of the most chilling things I've ever seen was when Max Cady kills one of his victims, strangling him out in the water. He says, "You're gonna die without a mark on you," and that was just so creepy, man.
That was a weird line, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny how, like, I guess, as soon as I finished watching this, I watched the original. So I think part of the reason was it had 3 of the original actors in this, the Martin Scorsese one. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool because I'd never seen it.
Yeah, usually those kind of things take you out of the movie, but I think it was really
it was the opposite for me because I know we've done a couple of movies that have been like I guess semi remakes. It's like the opposite. I can think of like Point Break had a remake, and then Total Recall. They did they've recently done a remake of that because I was picturing in my mind like people watching those movies and then going back to watch the movies we watched, like of those two, the one of Keanu Reeves and Point Break, and obviously with Schwarzenegger, and thinking their reaction to those movies. They're seeing it 30 years later than the originals, and they're not even seeing the originals. So I'm thinking, okay, well, what if I watch this original? So I'm amazed at how simplistic the original was compared to the later one. And that's not a bad thing. There were no subplots about an affair or damaged marriage.
No.
The police are much more sympathetic. The criminal doesn't quote Nietzsche or think he's an Ubermensch. There's a lot less violence, but it's all implied. Like he brutally beats and rapes a woman. That's all implied. But her reason for not testifying is totally opposite than Elena Douglas. Is like in the original movie, she doesn't want to testify because she doesn't want her parents to know, or she doesn't want anybody to find out that she's out there wherever she is. And she wants to ride back home. And then you have Gregory Peck, who is not even a lawyer when he's defending Max Cady, who in this movie it's only 8 years in prison for this guy. But Gregory Peck is an actual witness to a crime that Robert Mitchum is committing, and he stops the crime. And when you think of it that way, it's like, okay, well, he really didn't do anything wrong, and it makes the malice of what Robert Mitchum's doing even more enhanced. Like, he really is pissed off at this guy for stopping him from finishing his attack, which is an implied assault, but they don't really tell you. Like I said, a lot a lot of this movie was a little bit more implied in the remake. They had some of the same scenes, like he still calls him counselor, which is great.
Yeah.
And you have the car key scene, which is the way they introduce each other, and
right.
He has the same fashion sense as De Niro's character, with that Panama hat and the goofy kind of wardrobe and driving an old car.
Well, all the wardrobe in this movie, like my wife pointed out that Gregory Peck was channeling his inner Colonel Sanders during his little cameo here.
Yeah, he was. But it just it's more interaction between the characters that's interesting. Like they had the same bribing at the diner scene that the Scorsese one had, but this was a little bit longer and a little bit more involved. And Mitchum just is more intense and just he's more I don't know. It's hard. It's like he's more of a animal as they describe it in the movie than De Niro is.
I think Mitchum's 10 times scarier in a weird way than De Niro was. Yeah,
he's not crazy. He's like
because you would know someone like Mitchum.
Yeah, he's a brute, and like I said, there's no crazy to him. He's just a pissed off bastard. And even like the last 20 minutes of this movie it's like it reminded me of Apocalypse Now in a way, because they're actually in the river, but unlike the Scorsese movie where they're trying to use the daughter and the mom as a bait at the house, they're actually at a river house right next to the river, and there's a boathouse, but the boathouse doesn't really figure into it too much. But the whole last 20 minutes is hardly any dialogue. It's just Mitchum sneaking around without a shirt on, like going through the swamp, and then he kills the deputy, like you say, and then he grabs the girl, but he doesn't suck her thumb, or vice versa. And but you don't know what he's going to. There's violence there, but he's not. There's no intent of like assaulting her. He's just trying to like take her away from the scene, and then we have the big scene, and he doesn't. The bad guy doesn't die in this one. He's actually spoilers. He's shot, but he's that's Gregory Peck's last line in the movie is, "You're going to spend every day in jail after this," and and it's a great ending, and then they have that music at the end, the dun dun. It's just There was less fluff to me in the original movie. It just kind of it worked. I mean, it's even for a movie 30 years ago, it was nice that they actually filmed it on scene. It was in Savannah, not Wilmington, but close enough. It was at least a coastal town that was and the way he's even introduced in the movie, he's just walking through town and they're playing that music. You're like, this guy looks like he's up to something.
That music implies bad guy.
Yeah, it does.
Bad stuff. Bad stuff. Yeah.
And to top it off, Telly Savalas much better than Joe Don Baker. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So there you go. I would highly recommend watching the original of this movie just to see.
Yeah.
And like I said, this kind of leads into our nostalgia thing where you're not really watching a movie that's quote unquote better. I don't, I mean, and they're both good in their own ways. I liked it personally, the older version, just because it's more implied. I didn't need to see all the violence, and that last scene in the boathouse in the Scorsese movies a little too much for me to take. It's kind of had that natural born killers vibe to me, and
over the top. Yeah,
it was a little too much, and like I said, the whole background of De Niro, knowing the law and stuff. You didn't need that. I mean, this guy, we already know this guy's pissed off and he's an animal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So check out the original, guys. It's a great movie too. And for us, it's really super nostalgic. But
it gets into
millennial.
Yeah, it gets into the whole like I said, it's neither good nor bad. You see something from 30 years ago, and
it's different. It's just different. Yeah.
It's done differently, and it's based on the times that we could talk. We could have a whole. You know what? We need to have a podcast about just this.
I'll write it down. I'll put it on the to do.
Send it to the executives at NBC and let me know what happens.
All right. So Mike kind of gave you his impression of the movie. So for me, I think the first time, if we were going to go through the Grumpy meter, so to speak, Mike, the first time I saw it was a VHS rental. I didn't see it in the theater, and it was kind of I had the not Goodfellas syndrome on it. I was like, oh, this is Martin Scorsese. It didn't feel like a Martin Scorsese movie.
No, not at all.
I didn't think it was bad, but I came back and I always had the impression it was kind of like a trash movie, like a guilty pleasure movie.
Yeah.
But as I watched it again last night, I, I keep the same feelings for it, but it's a trash movie that's made by really good people. So it's kind of like it's like a free pass. You're allowed to like this trash because it's made by really good people. And
Right.
I really enjoyed. I think I enjoyed this movie the most seeing it last night for the second or third time.
Yeah, I think that's where I differ from you because
Yeah.
I didn't go into. I should have that. It was like it's almost like buckling your seatbelt before going down a bumpy, curvy gravel road. It's like I should have known to buckle my seatbelt before I watched this movie, but I didn't, and I went into it with the same thoughts I had when I saw this 30 years ago. Like this was a pretty good movie. Yeah, Scorsese, De Niro, and he came. Now watching De Niro to me came off so campy. It was hard for me to enjoy it. Honestly, it was just so like. And then like you said, it wasn't a Scorsese movie. Even the photography with the extreme like close-ups and the Dutch angle, I was like, this isn't what I'm used to. And it was, like I said, I wasn't prepared for that. I should have like I said, I should have gone into it kind of like you did, knowing these are guys that the top of their game. This is good acting. Like Noel T. Lang, they were really good. Like I said, Juliette Lewis was for a kid actor was really good, and that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. You had good acting in a cheesy movie.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was good cheese that you don't have any guilt about because it was made by good people. So.
Right.
All right. But, one of the things that keeps movies like these like not everybody loves movies like this because there's a good revenge element to it, and revenge is a really common trope in Hollywood and always has been. And we got to thinking about how well revenge movies do in the box office. So we thought it'd be fun for our feature. You just made the list, pal. This week we would look at our favorite revenge movies, Mike.
Yes, sir.
So let's do 3. I think we're kind of running out of time here. But Mike, run me through your first one.
I'm gonna couch this in this is another reason why I didn't like the Cape Fear movie, either one of them. Revenge movie, for me, this is totally me. I want to see why. I want to visually see why they want revenge, and that's one of the things I didn't like about Cape Fear is you really don't know. You know, but you don't see it. I'm a real visual person, so when I see a revenge movie, I want to see this guy's pissed off. Why? And the movies on my list either show you at the start or they show you at the end. And the first one I have is Revenge. So I've already mentioned this movie before. It came out in 1991. Has a Kevin Costner and Madeline Stowe in it as the couple. Has Anthony Quinn as a.
You're saying Revenge is about revenge?
Revenge is about revenge.
Never put that together.
Madeline Stowe ends up on a TV show called Revenge too, so that's that's a funny one. But yeah, it had a really good Latino American cast. It was totally filmed in Mexico. Anthony Quinn is like the drug lord, crime lord in Mexico, and Kevin Costner, of course, falls for his Quinn's young wife, and he finds out. He tries to kill Kevin Costner, leaves him out in the desert, which. Don't do that. Don't just leave the guy out in the desert. Make sure he's dead. Because, of course, Costner revives, gets some help from some various people, able to shoot his way to find the drug lord and find out where they stowed Madeline Stowe. And
I see what you did there.
Yeah, it was cheese. Another cheesy movie, but very atmospheric. Yep. I enjoyed it at the time, and like I said, it was not your traditional Kevin Costner movie, so I really liked it. Good movie to me.
That's a good pick. My first one on the list is kind of a cheap one, but I'm going to go with Ocean's 11, Mike. The 2001. The dreamy cast excluded. It's kind of a cool story. I'm always up for a good heist movie. So if you get a heist movie that is based on revenge, Danny Ocean's he's been in jail, and all the while he's been planning meticulously this elaborate heist. And that's just chocolate and peanut butter to me. I mean, getting those two put together. But I think every element of Ocean's 11 is fantastic, especially when you consider the original. Not that good. Sorry.
Yeah, that's if you want to get nostalgic. Yeah, the one in the late in the '60s is just campy. Yeah, just guys having fun on screen.
Yeah, I brought that up because we're referencing remakes from the '60s, and this one doesn't follow the same path. But but yeah,
defend that one.
Yeah, just the elaborate complexity of the heist and just to have everything kind of pulled together. George Clooney doesn't get enough credit. I mean, he's smug and he's glib and he's charming and all that, but he's at his core, he's really a good actor, and he really kind of delivers this movie. And I just thought it was fantastic, and that's my first revenge movie, Ocean's 11.
Nice one. My number 2 would be Star Trek 2 from 1982. And the movie poster right behind me, if you can actually see me, but you can't. It is for me the ultimate like sci-fi revenge movie where you have a setup from the TV show back in the '60s, and had Ricardo Montalban, rich Corinthian leather guy, and he's kind of he's a race of Ubermensch, like super people that were humans, but they were bred to be super strong and super smart. And they're shown on this one episode as wanting to take over the Enterprise, and of course they're beaten and defeated, and he is exiled onto a planet and sent out just to see if you can survive, dude. He appears in this movie, and it's one of the greatest introductions of all. But his main goal is to get revenge on Captain Kirk, and it's again cheesy but fabulous. This one of those movies, if it came out today, would be just blockbuster material. And he's quoting Shakespeare. It's you got the two spaceships fighting each other. You got the captain who gets fooled because his pants pulled down basically, and then finally he figures it out. And you got the famous Khan yelling and gets back and of course Khan gets his comeuppance. But it's great revenge flick.
Great wig.
Awesome wig.
All right, well, my second on the list is it's a Quentin Tarantino movie, which all his movies are essentially revenge movies. But my favorite of those is Inglourious Basterds. I liked everything about this movie. I didn't think I was going to like it very much, especially the pace and
right.
But I think it's his best movie. That's me. I could be wrong, but the revenge here is really driven by. You don't give enough credit to Melanie Laurent, who plays Shoshana in this one, the Jewish girl that sees her entire family murdered by the Nazis. She develops this amazing plan, again in a movie theater. And it's historical fiction, Mike, so it didn't really happen, but
okay.
But she ends up helping get Hitler killed, and getting the entire Gestapo in a film theater and like burning them up. But just the toils and tribulations that she goes through from those horrible opening scenes, I think she just did an amazing job in this role. Everybody remembers Brad Pitt from this movie and his Jewish brigade, and they're by all means they're amazing. But she's really the quiet lead that just really pulls this thing together for me, and I just love it. So Inglourious Basterds is my second favorite revenge movie.
Nice. All right, I got some honorable mentions, and all of them are from the same actor, who I'll basically call the king of revenge for lack of a term. Clint Eastwood.
Oh yeah.
You talk about somebody who's been in some of the most classic revenge movies, like Hang 'Em High, High Plains Drifter. Hey, Jeffrey Lewis is in that one. Unforgiven, Outlaw Josie Wales, and Gran Torino, just to name a few of them. And that leads me to my number 1, which is also Western, but not with Clint Eastwood. It was Once Upon a Time in the West, which has
it's a good one.
Possibly the best revenge motive of any of these. It opens up with a young. This is gonna be spoilers, so if you don't want to hear this, don't. It opens up with a young Charles Bronson who's as an adult is just trying to find out. You don't know what his motive is. He's trying to go after this one guy who's played by Henry Fonda, who completely plays against type. He's always the good guy. So he's like Gregory Peck, and for years he was the good guy in so many movies. All of a sudden he appears as this just terrible. first thing you see him do in this movie is just kill a whole family. And it's like, oh my god.
Yeah, it would be like Tom Hanks being a serial killer.
Yeah, exactly. And anyway, you find out that Charles Bronson's motive is to kill Henry Fonda because years ago he had taken the young little boy Charles Bronson and his brother and made them hang by ropes and ended up killing the brother. And Charles Bronson barely lives, and all these years later he gets his revenge on Henry Fonda at the very end. And it's classic Sergio Leone Western, and my favorite probably revenge movie of all time.
Oh, that's a great one, Mike. Nice job. All right, I'll bring it home. My favorite, my last one on my list at least, is the aptly titled "Revenge of the Nerds" from 1984. It lacks the same tone as your previous mention there, right? But this was a time where the nerdification of pop culture hadn't happened yet, right? So anybody that was into robotics or science fiction or anything like that, they were generally looked and frowned upon by the jocks. And so back in the 80s, the way you got back at people was to mutilate their private parts,
wasabi and their jocks.
Yes, take naked pictures of women, panty raids. All that was completely acceptable. That movie could never be made today. But the theme of the movie is that nerds are people too, and they end up winning with their brains. And it's beyond the sex comedy, 80s sex comedy romp. There's some tones in there. There's some social tones that it picks up on, and it was kind of the facilitated nerd culture to kind of become kitsch or at least cool way back in 1984. So Revenge of the Nerds, Mike.
Nice. That was a good swerve there.
You didn't see that one coming, did you?
Not at all.
All right. Well, I think we covered most of the things we wanted to talk about. I just want to remind everybody that we're currently featured on all the social media platforms and all the podcasting platforms. If you'd like to reach out to us, you can check out our Instagram page at Grumpy Nostalgia. And if you want to send us an email with a request for a show, or if you want to do like our previous guest Molly did, sit on the show, you can send us an email at nostalgiagrumps@gmail.com. So, Mike, that's going to kind of wrap it up. Anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
Muddy Jessica Lange.
I ain't your porch baby, buddy. Well, for Mike James, this is Justin, and we will see you again next time.
I don't want to see you, I don't want to hear you, I don't want to smell you. Now leave.